Imagine a vault filled not with gold, not with weapons, but with seeds, tiny, unremarkable grains, each one carrying the difference between survival and starvation. During the chaos of World War II, while cities were burned and supply lines collapsed, a secret agricultural mission was unfolding deep inside the Soviet Union. Scientists weren't just growing crops. They were racing against time to preserve what they called resilience, seeds bred to survive drought, frost, poor soil, and total infrastructure failure. These weren't ordinary harvests, they were famine seeds, and for nearly a century, their story remained buried beneath geopolitics, propaganda, and war. Tonight, we're uncovering that hidden legacy. Because this isn't just about history, it's about survival engineering on a biological level. What ancient traits were locked into these forgotten varietals? How were they developed under siege conditions? And why are modern researchers quietly returning to them as climate instability rises? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear sounds almost unbelievable. In the early 20th century, Soviet botanists launched one of the most ambitious agricultural projects in history. They scoured remote villages, mountain valleys, and isolated farming communities searching for landraces, locally adapted crop varieties shaped by centuries of hardship, wheat that tolerated freezing winds, barley that grew in marginal soil, potatoes that survived short growing seasons. Their goal wasn't efficiency, it was endurance. Then war came. Sieges cut cities. Supply chains collapsed. Entire regions faced starvation. Yet in research stations and seed banks, scientists guarded collections of these famine seeds, often at immense personal sacrifice. While food shortages ravaged the population, some researchers reportedly refused to eat the preserved specimens, protecting them for the future rather than consuming them in desperation. Why? Because they understood something chilling. War ends. Famine can last generations. These seeds represented insurance, genetic memory, a biological archive of how crops survive catastrophes. And here's where the mystery deepens. You know, many of these varietals were never designed for modern industrial farming. They weren't optimized for uniform size or maximum yield under chemical fertilizer. They were optimized for unpredictability, inconsistent rainfall, temperature swings, poor soil, neglect. In other words, the exact stresses that modern monocultures struggle with today. So, we must ask, did the past solve a problem we're only now rediscovering? As global agriculture leans heavily on a narrow genetic base, resilience becomes fragile. A single disease can devastate millions of acres. But the famine seeds preserved diversity, traits that modern hybrids sometimes bred out in pursuit of efficiency. Deep root systems, cold tolerance, disease resistance, slow but reliable growth. Not flashy, but durable. And that durability may explain why some of these forgotten lines quietly influenced breeding programs throughout the 20th century. Traits extracted, crossed, hidden inside modern varieties, without most consumers ever knowing their origin. This is the victory in the mystery. What began as a desperate wartime safeguard may have shaped global food security in ways we rarely acknowledge. The shadow harvest didn't just feed one nation. It influenced agricultural genetics worldwide. But here's the twist. As climate volatility increases, with extreme heat, erratic rainfall, and soil degradation, researchers are reopening archives and seed vaults. They're searching backward to move forward. They're studying traits that industrial agriculture once considered inefficient. But that might now be essential. Could a century-old barley strain outperform modern crops in drought conditions? Could heritage wheat tolerate cold snaps better than high-yield hybrids? These aren't nostalgic questions. They're strategic ones. And that's why this story matters beyond history. Because famine seeds represent a philosophy. Prepare not for ideal conditions, but for worst-case scenarios. Breed not for maximum output in perfect systems, but for survival when systems fail. As we dig deeper into this episode, we'll explore how these varietals were collected, how they were stored through war and political upheaval, and how their genetic traits continue to echo through modern agriculture. We'll separate myth from documented facts. We'll examine how much of this legacy is romanticized and how much is measurable science. And we'll ask the question survivalists and historians alike should be asking. If resilience was once prioritized over efficiency, should it be again? Because hidden inside dusty envelopes and cold storage vaults is a reminder that food security isn't just about technology. It's about diversity, patience, foresight. Seeds don't look powerful, but they outlast empires. So, stay with me, because next, we step inside the vaults, trace the scientists who protected these collections during siege and scarcity, and uncover how forgotten famine seeds may still be shaping what ends up on your plate today. History doesn't just record survival, sometimes it plants it.